Hello again, everyone, and welcome again to my channel. As always, lots of you will have seen on my videos that I've done loads of diving with Rick Ayrton, and I know loads of people have asked me to get him on here to tell us about some of the epic diving we've done together, but also I think to talk about the fabulous photos that you've all seen during my videos, and how he manages to capture them and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really pleased to have Rick here with me today. And hello, Rick.
Hi, Dom. It's good to see you again. It's only a couple of days since we were together on the boat.
Absolutely. So we were diving at the weekend. We dived together. We had dolphins on deco stops.
Yeah, fantastic.
It was an unexpectedly amazing dive.
It was. Snatched out of the jaws of the weather.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I personally find really fascinating about your diving career, Rick, is the longevity that you've had in terms of deep diving. So I mean, you've been all the way through from open circuit through to closed circuit, carried on doing it, and you're still doing it now, which is amazing. So please, can you give everyone a bit of a flavour of how you got here? Right.
Okay. Well, my first ever dive, you'll be horrified to hear, was under Swanage Pier in 1980 something. Horrible thought, but it all moved on from there. I particularly enjoyed it, from an early stage in my career, enjoyed the deeper stuff, but at that time it's probably 30 meters was deep. Gradually went even deeper on open circuit air, down to 50, 60 meters sometimes, which I would hate to do now, but I did it back then fairly happily. But I think it was it's probably late 1990s. I did my open circuit trimix course with the legendary Richard Bull, who at that time ran a dive shop in Bristol called Current State Diving. And having done the open circuit trimix course, it opened up those sort of deeper wrecks, which you could actually do with a relatively clear head. At that time, I wasn't taking any photographs at all. I didn't have a camera. But I sort of carried on, and it was a strange sort of time, because with these whispers about rebreathers coming into the recreational diving market, and about 2000, a friend of mine got one, and I remember particularly 2001, I was on this expedition on Loyal Watcher to North Cornwall, looking for new shipwrecks. I was on open circuit. I had twin 15s at the time, and it was the expedition that located the wreck of the St. George, which was quite special. We found the bell, massive pile of copper ingots. We were able to then sell the marks to a salvage company, and basically all of us paid with the proceeds of that for our trip on the Loyal Watcher. And at that time, it sort of suddenly became clear that if I wanted to go any further, I needed to get a rebreather. And so in 2002, I got a rebreather, did my course. Virtually the week after I'd finished my course, a friend was selling a video camera for small money, and I decided to purchase it and started taking underwater video, which thoroughly enjoyed. I enjoyed the process of putting the films together, and I guess being Bristol based helped a bit with the progress of filmmaking. For those that might not be aware, Bristol is a centre of sort of wildlife photography of the BBC, and so it has a big element of sort of underwater photography for the media. And I sort of got to know Crispin Sadler, who was producer of Deep Wreck Mysteries, and myself, and in particular Dan Stevenson, were enrolled by him to help out in the first couple of series of Deep Wreck Mysteries, and that was a real eye-opener for me. Instead of having a sort of relatively inexpensive video camera, I had one of these fantastic Sony broadcast quality videos in an Amphibico housing, which was worth a small fortune, which I have to say nowadays a GoPro will do a much better job for a fraction of the cost. But that's beside the point. It was that sort of turned me away from taking my own video, actually, because I realized at that time I couldn't afford to invest in broadcast quality video. And so I moved over to stills, and I bought a still camera in 2007. And I've got some, I've put together some photos which sort of take me through my journey and of underwater photography. And one of the things that really captured what I want to do was to sort of get the full picture of shipwrecks, not just sort of little details, which seemed to be what people were sort of getting, especially on UK shipwrecks, because, you know, as you know, we're not blessed with the best visibility in the world, although sometimes it can be quite good. So I don't know if you want me to, at this stage, share my presentation and we can talk over it as we go along.
That would be fantastic, Rick. Just before we do that, though, we have to go back to Deep Wreck Mysteries. We can't just skip past it.
We can't just,
because you know that's like a major TV series, isn't it? And you kind of
I suppose it is. Yeah,
bit of that. So which episodes were you on, and tell us about the shipwrecks?
Yeah, so I suppose the sort of the biggest one I was involved in was the Armenian story. So I think that was Search for the Bone Wreck, where we were looking for this liner off North Cornwall, which was carrying mules for the Western Front. We started. We thought we'd found it, and we'd actually found the Patia, which was also a fantastic shipwreck, which you and I dived, I think, a year or two back. And I have to say, a year or two back, it had changed significantly since I'd previously dived it. The bow had all collapsed quite significantly. But Patia was a fantastic diver. Then we went on to find the Armenian, and I did several.
The letters off the Patia as well, Rick.
Yeah, I've got the letters,
haven't we?
I've got the letters, and I've got the maker's plate, which is currently in possession of Lee Bishop, who's polishing it up for me, which is very not kind of him.
so obviously, so for those people who don't know the story, you found most of the letters of the name, correct?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I've got a P, an A, a T, and another A, but I've not got an I. Which, yeah, I could fabricate one, but it doesn't seem right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But that was a real treat. The letters are about, I don't know if you can see, sort of about so big. Would have been put on the side of the ship, and obviously were taken off, I presume, to stop enemy ships sort of identifying it. But they were up in the forecastle area of the ship when I found them. We never found the bell of the Patia, and we think it was, so the bow was sort of lying on its, trying to think, port side, and so the upper side of the forecastle, the starboard side, I went in and found the letters. The lower side, there was a load of old fishing net over it, and a number of us think that the bell was probably under there somewhere. But when we dived it a couple of years ago, that's all collapsed, and I think it's probably gone forever. Although who knows, it might suddenly turn up. You never know.
Yeah.
But yeah. So there was the Patia. There was the stealth sub episode. That was an interesting one, because I remember we chartered Skin Deep to go and take some footage of that in one May, and it just happened to coincide with the peak of the May plankton bloom. The visibility was about 0.5 meter, and we were hopefully trying to come back with some footage. I think we got something, but it was very difficult. And
probably worth mentioning what depths all these things are. So what depth was the Patia? What depth was the Armenian?
So Patia is about 80 meters. The Armenian, when we found it, was about, the very bottom was 99.5 or something like that. We didn't get over the ton. The stealth sub was about 40 meters. So they were a bit varied. I did the I think with this, there was one about the 1021, which I know you've posted about just recently. We did that as well, which was, as you know, is about a 55 meter dive. And then the other one that was quite a big thing, which is not part of the main series. We did an episode about the AE2, the Australian submarine in Turkey, which was really nice because we all got taken out to Turkey to go and film this thing. Although the expedition itself was there were some issues that caused problems, but we got away with it, and the program was made.
Excellent.
So I unfortunately I wasn't involved in any of the Northern Irish stuff. For one reason or another, I couldn't get the time off. I had a day job at the time. I couldn't drop everything and go and do these film shoots when they were all needed. But I was involved in some, which was really nice.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I mean, so thanks a lot. So I guess now if you want to flash up your presentation, and we'll have a look at through your journey in photos.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a treat for lots of people have seen your photos, but to see a load at once is going to be fabulous. Thank you.
Does that work?
Yeah, we have. I've got it. I'm just going to get rid of my ugly mug.
Yeah, I put this together last night actually, because I thought a bit of structure in it would actually be quite worthwhile, and it's unfortunately part of the sort of improvement in the photographs people can get these days. It is due to the improving technology in cameras, and so the newer cameras will undoubtedly get better results than the older ones. But if I just, there we go. Let's say that this is my first picture. I titled the presentation "Trying to Get the Bigger Picture," and the bigger picture is trying to get a scene in. And so this was 2007. This was the first trip I did with a stills camera. I suppose I'd learned some basics of composing pictures and things by using the video cameras, but this is the first trip I did using a still camera. This is a shallow wreck, obviously, in the Red Sea. You can see the surface there. It's quite spectacular though, and you could actually go right inside it. It was great fun. And I particularly like this shot because it sort of shows, big machinery and things off in the distance, which is quite nice. And the Nikon D200 was a great camera in its day, but is incredibly dated now. The thing about it was that it needed an awful lot of light to get a shot like that, and the only shot that I've got, I think you might recognize this, Jimmy Lane in Plymouth. So this is about 18 meters in the UK, and some of the viewers might recognize this from the James Egan Lane. It would be difficult. You can still get into that space, but the roof has collapsed significantly now. I don't know when you last dived the James Egan Lane, but I actually dived it earlier this year with Liz, and we managed to get some shots in there, but it's squashed down significantly. How, going back to this shot, 2009, the Nikon D200 was able to get a sort of bigger picture view of a shipwreck in the UK, but it's only 18 meters, and there's quite a lot of light in there, and anything deeper, and it was really struggling. So we then move on, and I changed cameras in 2013, and I don't know if you've been to Malta and dived the Polynesian, but
I have. Yeah.
One of the most stunning
lovely
wrecks that I'm aware of in Malta, and this is a view of one of the helms. You can just about make out the boss of one of the wheels on it, on towards the stern of the ship. And
so we need a depth. We need a depth for all these things, Rick.
Okay, depth. Depth of the Polynesian is about 63 meters. So yeah. If I'd had the D200 on this, the image, I'd have been able to use lights to light up that helm, but more than likely everything else would have been black because the light wouldn't have been coming in. I'd have had to introduce it myself. But with the upgrade to the 610, increase in the performance of the sensors on the camera, it sort of was able to do a much better job. So
I love the fact you've got the diver in that one as well.
Yeah,
Divers in wreck photos just make it so much more interesting.
Divers do give it scale. Sometimes it's nice to have shots that don't have divers in, but often it's nice to have them in. So I think this particular one now is over the sort of the engine room area of the Polynesian, and it's a stunning wreck. I remember me and that guy, I can't remember who, my buddy then, we got a telling off because we overran our time on that dive. But what you can also see is there's a bit of color on the wreck in the foreground. I'm using some strobes at that time to sort of add a bit of extra light in, and the camera handles it quite well. I was also playing with, and you've probably never seen me use a tripod underwater, although I have a plan for our forthcoming trip on the Victory to consider taking a tripod down. You can get a very different effect with using a tripod. So this is on the Chiara. So Chiara's 30 meters. When you're using a tripod, what I will do is I will set it in interval timer mode, so it'll take a shot every 5 seconds or something, and I'll go over and then pose myself to get the shot. But it does mean you can extend the shutter speed, so you can make the shutter speed quite long. You can have half-second shutter speed, which means you can get a lot of light in. This is obviously the steering quadrant on the Chiara. Lit, I've got a couple of started using video lights a bit more, and to provide sort of lighting away from the actual camera. But I thought I'd put that one in. So that's 2015. I'm then moving. You'll see I've changed cameras again. Malin is the place where I think I honed my skills in underwater photography, particularly, and it wasn't on this particular trip. So I went in 2016, and I went, and obviously this is the Audacious. That's the prop that's between the two rudders on Audacious. It was the following year I went, and I somehow something clicked. I think it was the trip. I was with a sort of well-known Danish underwater photographer called Rick Anderson, who you might have heard. He's done a load of fantastic shots of Baltic wrecks, he's also done a load from the Battle of Jutland, which we'll come on to a bit in a bit. But somehow these shots suddenly all made sense, and we've got the bigger picture, that, you know, massive prop and a couple of divers there to give it scale, and then this shot of one of the Sherman tanks on the Empire Heritage, lit up by a couple of divers. In fact, you can see several tanks there. There are the others on their side. Yeah, I was just so pleased to get a shot like this and bring it home, and precisely what I'm after. I could have done a whole PowerPoint full of shots from this particular trip.
So these are all about 65 meters, aren't they? That's
all about 65 meters. But the thing about Malin is that, you know, on a good day, when there's the light there, it is just absolutely phenomenal. And at this stage, I've started to not use strobes, just using the natural light and people carrying off-board lighting, like here. Yeah,
I mean, Malin is just unbelievably good.
It is just absolutely incredible. Yeah. But then we move on to this one, slightly famous one from Greece, sister ship of the Titanic, the Britannic. So the depth here is about 116 meters. Yeah, it's just amazing that there's that much ambient light there. I remember I went down to the seabed and placed that video light to light up the lower prop. And yeah, the frustrating thing is that there's that net dangling down from the rudder, which is snagged on it. But I'm not sure that the ghost fishing lot would go and move that one. I think it's a bit of a job, because it's going to be about 100 meters to do that.
I'll tell you, at this point, Rick, we probably just need to give your book a bit of a plug, by the way.
Give the book a plug, yeah, sure. So on the back of Diving Britannic, and probably the fact that in 2020 there was the horrendous COVID time and I had lots of spare time on my hands, I put together my book, Expedition Britannic, which documents the story of the expedition that I was involved in to Britannic, which was really a real highlight of my diving career, although it's fading into the past now. It's amazing how time flies. And I think it was on the back of that book that I first came into contact with yourself and asked you to have a look at it as one of the reviewers, which was greatly appreciated at the time.
Sorry, so for those people who are interested in Rick's book, I am going to put a link to it.
Thank you very much. I should have made a slide of it, shouldn't I? I missed a trick there.
You're too modest, Rick. So I'm going to put a link in the description. The reason I'd like to highlight it is because it is a brilliant book. It has got obviously a ton of stunning photos in, as you would expect, and this one here is just one of many. But the thing that I think is particularly interesting for people who are divers is that what you do in there, Rick, is you talk in real detail about all the diving aspects of the dive. You've got that annex, haven't you, where you talk about the dive plans and the gases and the procedures and all those kind of things. And it's, I think for me, that's something that's often missing from diving books is that real level of detail. So it's really good that you've included it. And I'd encourage everyone to go and buy Rick's book, obviously, and to go and read it. It is fantastic. And as well as the Britannic, it also covers the Burdigala.
Which is an amazing wreck,
which is like the shakeout dive for Britannic, isn't it?
Yeah, and as a wreck dive, it's probably a better wreck dive than Britannic because you get so much more time on it.
Yeah. And
yeah,
you know, once again, stunning photos of that. And the other thing I think, Rick, is I've heard you tell this story, but other people won't have done. I think your problem with your P system on the Britannic is a story that I don't know if you're happy to share it. But if
no, I'm happy to share it. It's one of those things that every male diver who uses a P valve should be aware of the possibility of it failing and not working as intended. Obviously, there are times when they don't work and they just leak, and that's fine. You don't have a problem, but mine failed. It blocked, and I had hours of deco to do. And the only thing I could do in the end, unfortunately, and I dread to think what might have happened if I'd not had a front entry dry suit, I actually undid the zip and pulled the damn thing off to get relief, and so completely flooded my dry suit. I was in the shallows by this time, so you know, Mediterranean water, it was actually fairly warm, but nevertheless, you know, it's quite chilling. Even, you know, if you're surrounded by 25-degree water, it still gets quite cold. I was certainly glad to get out of the water on that dive.
Yeah, and I guess one of those things that, you know, I think it's really interesting because small numbers of people know about these kind of things, these kind of situations, but that was potentially a really nasty.
Absolutely. I remember thinking, what can I do to mitigate? I tried all sorts of things. You know, you're trying to sort of yank the thing from outside your dry suit, and nothing worked. And in the end, I realized that either I had to surface, which I really did not want to do because I'd have put myself at massive risk of major decompression incident, or I had to release it some other way, and that involved opening my dry suit and reaching in and getting it disconnected, and that's what I did. And I remember I was diving with Jacob Mackenzie, and I wrote on a slate what I was going to do, because I sort of needed both hands to deal with it and try not to think about buoyancy and stuff like that. And so he was really good. He went behind me, got hold of my rebreather, so that I was basically hands free and I could reach in and do what I needed to do and get myself sorted out. And that was great. And the only other thing, I think it was really difficult climbing out of the water, because obviously my suit was completely full of water by then, and you know, it has pounds and pounds, kilos and kilos of water in it when you're trying to climb up a ladder. There were no dive lifts on the boat in Greece, so we had to come up a ladder. But I got there. I was able to get my knees up, and then I could lean forward, and all the water drained out of the suit, and then I was fine.
Yeah, and you know, I guess that how long did it take you from realizing you had a problem to accepting that the only way to deal with it was to flood your dry suit?
Yeah, I probably 20 minutes, half an hour, because I knew I was at that. When you start using the P valve, you sort of, it can often be a bit of a struggle to get it started. So to begin with, it's not an issue. It then obviously became an issue, and from that point on, you start thinking about ways of getting around it. So it's probably about half an hour. I would hate it. If I was in the UK and you had to do the same thing, I think at this time of the year, as long as you weren't having to do it for longer than about an hour, I'd probably still do it. But, you know, early season, it would be a really hard call to know whether that's the right thing to do. But hopefully that'll never happen again.
I know, Rick, you always test it before you get in the water now, don't you?
I'm meticulous about testing it now before getting in the water. Yeah. So we digress this picture, you can see that again the camera changes, and I changed the Nikon Z6, which was a bit of a double-edged sword. It was new tech from Nikon, and the sensor performed really well. As you can see, you know, these are pictures captured in very low light that have actually a significant amount of detail. The problem with that particular camera was that the focusing left a little bit to be desired. Yeah, it was fine, but I from the Britannic trip in particular, I've got a lot of images that are out of focus, and I'm hoping at some I've still got them, and I'm hoping at some stage some tech will come out that will enable me to make them sharp. You never know. But yeah, I think I like this shot at the bow. This is the diver there is Scott Roberts, who was the expedition organizer for Britannic. Particularly like this shot because, you know, that anchor is, you know, it's iconic. It came from the West Midlands. It was forged in the West Midlands, taken across the Irish Sea to Belfast, and installed on Britannic, just the same as the anchors from Titanic and Olympic. So
I mean,
yeah,
great colour in that shot as well, I think.
Yeah. You know, that, and it's that shot that sort of illustrates how good the cameras had got by that stage when the focusing worked. But I stuck with the Z6 for a while, and you might remember this dive. This is Fran on the U95. That was about 80 meters, I think, wasn't it?
70 something, I think, but yeah, no, you can. I've actually done a video of this dive of our scrubbing the prop and identifying the U95. Yeah, so it's out there.
Yeah, so I was still using the Z6 on this one. I'd sort of got to work out how well it worked, you know, what its strengths were, and I've got some video as well of the prop scrubbing of that, which was taken on the Z6, which I thought worked pretty well.
Yeah. And that previous photo is an absolutely stunning photo, by the way.
Yeah. It ended up as a cover shot on Scuba magazine, actually, this one. So it had been cropped into a vertical, but yeah, it was still a lovely shot. Amazing shot of a submarine underwater. Yeah, I like the reflection of the mask in the light. Sort of adds something somehow.
Yeah.
And then I think I've got the first of several pictures of yourself. the Victory. So the Victory is an amazing dive. It's one of those dives that has so much and yet so little at the same time. It has these cannons scattered on the seabed, but otherwise it's basically just sand and a few bits and pieces. But it is just quite amazing to go and visit this place where you know that, you know, over 1,000 sailors lost their lives in a storm as this wooden warship went to the bottom with its cargo of cannons. Yeah, quite incredible. And I'm looking forward to going back again, actually.
Yeah, me too as well. I mean, so a couple of things about Victory. I mean, first thing is that photo won a prize, didn't it?
Yeah.
Second thing with that photo is I've got a copy of it blown up that's actually on the wall of my office, because it is a wonderful photo.
Yeah,
and really grateful to you for taking it.
Yeah, you'll see.
Yeah, so yeah. Go on, Rick. Sorry.
I was going to say you can see I've changed cameras again to the Nikon Z9, and all the remaining pictures are with that camera, which is my current camera, which it addresses all the focusing issues that the previous camera had, and you know I you know, occasionally you underwater cameras misfocus, and it's usually because there's say a bit of plankton or something in the water that it decides it wants to focus on rather than the subject that you're actually looking at. But the numbers of dud shots these days are few and far between, to be quite honest.
Do you want to mention a bit about housings as well, Rick? Because I mean, I know obviously there's some particular challenges with housings, aren't there?
Yeah. Yeah. So going back, my first Nikon was housed in a CNC housing, aluminium housing. Worked well. I actually had that one down to it. It's only rated to 60 meters, but I had it down to 100 on one occasion. But when I changed it to the 610, there was a new kid on the block called Nauticam, and a fellow photographer who I had known quite well, Alex Tattersall, was the dealer in the UK of Nauticam, and I decided to jump ship to the Nauticam housings, and I've basically stayed with them ever since. They're made in Hong Kong, I think, but the tech in them is absolutely phenomenal. They're built incredibly robustly, and I'm able to, I don't know what mine would be worth if I tried to sell it on the open market, because it's all scuffed. It flies around the boat deck on rough days, and it just soaks it all up. It's an amazing bit of kit, basically, and it sort of keeps me in the game. And
I mean, you are certainly a lot less precious about your camera and your housing than a lot of people I've seen, Rick. And
well, they're tools. It's designed to do a job, and it has to put up with the vagaries of how we deal with things. You go on some boats, especially if you're overseas, and the crew will pass people down their cameras. I couldn't do that on a boat when we're jumping in on wrecks in the English Channel. If I don't take my camera with me, it doesn't come, so I've got to jump in with it. And they can handle it. They've got all this sort of anti-leak tech in them, which makes them much more watertight to sort of jumping in. So I think that's much less of an issue these days. The fact that it gets a bit battered is just one of those hazards of doing this sort of diving. And for instance, I will tend, although I do have some glass ports which go on the front of the camera in front of the camera lens, I don't like to use them on the sort of diving we do, basically because if they get scratched, they're toast. You have to throw them away and get another one. Whereas with an acrylic port, if it gets scratched a bit, you can polish the scratch out and live another day. And so I tend to use acrylic ports for technical diving. If I'm in the tropics and it's all a bit more calm, and then I'll get the glass port out. They're allegedly slightly better quality, optical quality, should I say? But yeah.
And what about depth ratings as well? So I mean, I know.
Yeah. So when I was doing Britannic, I knew it was going to be over 100 meters, and so when I got the housing for Britannic, I specifically got a 150 meter rated housing, and what that means is you get uprated springs that work all the controls, because what you find is that if you don't have the uprated springs, you go to depth and the springs all push in because they can't oppose the pressure, and things become non-functional on the housing. When I changed to the Nikon Z9, I thought, I won't be doing much deep mud stuff anymore. That was a bit foolish. But in actual fact, the Z9 didn't come in 150 meter rated form, and I had to go with 100 meter rated housing. And I have had one or two issues when I've been doing deep diving where I've not been able to control it properly. I can usually change things that involve turning something, but the push buttons sometimes don't work. And I've had one or two situations where it's got into an odd mode and I've not been able to swap it out until I've ascended. But normally I set up the camera how I'm going to use it as I jump in, and not much changes, to be quite honest. So yeah.
I think one of the things probably to highlight to people is, what we're talking about here is doing 100-odd meter dive off, occasionally in some pretty challenging conditions. So as well as all the normal diving stuff that has to be done, on top of, in terms of monitoring kit and, keeping alive and all that kind of stuff. On top of that, you then put this huge extra task load of managing a fairly significant piece of technology, the camera. And I think people often don't, when you look at your photos, you go, oh, that's a brilliant photo. What people don't appreciate, I think anyway, is in order to get that photo, you have put this, massive additional workload on yourself. And I would say that I think you can only achieve that because you have such a, history of both, really deep diving and, taking photos underwater, and because of that, you both of those things come much easier to you than they might do other people.
Possibly. I think I have a feeling that if things ever hit the fan, I would be happy to jettison the camera, and I think you have to have that mindset that the camera is not that important, and if it got into a real bad situation, you just get rid of it. But thankfully it's never
that really sad case earlier this year, wasn't there, of I believe a female diver somewhere out in the tropics who chased her GoPro down to 80-odd meters and didn't come up again. And
it's not if something like that happens, it's not worth it. I know I had a, if you recall, last year on the Kingsbridge, I'd finished the dive and I was going back, and I'd taken my camera off to do something else, came back up to the shot line with my camera, forgotten that I'd not clipped it on, and went to remove my strobe, dropped the camera back to the seabed, and had to go and chase it, and probably added an extra half an hour of decompression at that time, which was a bit embarrassing for me as much as anything else.
But crucially didn't put you weren't, you were incurring extra deco, but you were not, that wasn't a life-threatening situation.
That's right.
Other than the ribbing that you got on the boat.
Absolutely. And having to buy pints all around that evening.
So I guess where do we go from Victory then on our
I think we go to Plymouth when the conditions are good, and I think James always has a James Beluza, skipper of Seeker, always has a fond memory of the St Andre, and we just had the most epic conditions on that particular day in 2022, and I've never seen anything like it. I thought it was a one-off, but I have to say we have seen conditions as good since then, but when it happens, it is just phenomenal, isn't it? Absolutely phenomenal. To be able to see a site like that, that you can see a bit of silt has been kicked up, but that's only because people have been rooting around in the wreckage looking for stuff. Just incredible. So we got you can see the engine.
Isn't it?
Sorry,
that's 75 meters.
75 meters, and ambient light, nice and clear, lovely. So the distance between the two outer divers must be 10 meters or so at least. A diver must be 2 meters across from head to fin tip. So quite incredible.
And I think I'm the second one from the left in that photo, but
you are, yes. But
it was a great day.
The other big thing in 2022 was obviously this one, which is a very memorable dive for myself, for first spotting the bell, and you were my buddy on that particular day, and it was an incredibly challenging and yet incredibly rewarding dive. quite very memorable indeed.
115 meters, Rick.
115 meters, and thankfully the camera, I was concerned, A, that the camera would flood, and B, that the camera would not let me take pictures because buttons pushed in, but thankfully it behaved itself and took some lovely shots of the bell and so on. Yeah, it's a fantastic day, that one. Really good. Really good.
Great thing to be involved with that dive. And once again, another video of this on my channel for anybody who wants to know more about the first dive, discovery of the USS Jacob Jones.
Then what else have we got? So you put a 1021 shot in, so I thought I ought to as well. Or you've just recently done a 1021 story. This is a shot that got third place in the British wide angle category in underwater photography of the year a couple of years ago, and I just loved it as a sort of wide view of a whole shipwreck. Just incredible, really. And I think what I've learned more than anything over the years is identifying divers who are happy to pose and who know what to do and get in the right place to make a nice picture. And this guy does, and it makes such a difference. You can sometimes know people would like to be in pictures, but somehow when you take the picture, it just looks too posed. And although this is obviously posed, it just somehow looks right. But amazing to see these U-boats underwater when the viz is so good. And then I think we move on to the Negro, which was again another fantastic, and I'm sure you've got a video of this one, have you?
I have indeed. Yeah.
And this was again a fantastic day. You can see it's despite the quality of the latest sensors in cameras, there's still not a lot of light down there, and there's a lot of darkness. And I think that's the thing that I found. Anything, weirdly, you can go down to about 80 meters and still get reasonable ambient light, but I've never had much below 80 meters. It's all certainly in this country anyway. It's always been rather dark, as you can see there. And then last year, the Apollonia, which was an epic dive in absolutely fantastic visibility. Which is quite something.
Yeah, I mean, those two diesel engines like that are wonderful, aren't they? And once again, actually, I've got a video of this dive and this dive. So.
So you might not, you've probably not, this isn't the usual picture. This is a new shot that you won't have seen of the Hans Jensen. Obviously, the one that I got a photo award for is a vertical shot, and this is a landscape shot. And weirdly, actually, the more I look at this one, the more I actually like it better. It sort of shows a slightly sort of wider view of the ship. I think you can see more light inside the forecastle there, which is quite nice. So yeah, no, the lovely shot, and it looks right with you lighting up the bow there. It's fantastic.
I mean, I guess 80 odd meters. English Channel, that kind of makes your point about the ambient light being there, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then we come to this year. This is one of the gun on the Revia, which we did early season, wasn't it? Sort of in April, I think. So it was pretty cold at that time, but that was again some good light on the wreck. The Revia is about 50 meters, I think, isn't it? Yeah, or maybe a bit less. But around about 50. Trentonian earlier this year with your bell, which ended
Yeah.
up being given back to the Canadians. But fantastic to find it, wasn't it? Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, great to have you there to get a photo of it.
Yeah, well, you can see also that sometimes you can get a great photo that actually it shows a moment in time. It's not a fantastically composed image, and there's loads of silt around, but it sort of shows the excitement of finding something like a bell. I was going to put in the picture of Will holding it, but I thought this one would work better.
That would certainly get my vote. Obviously, Will, I punctured my dry glove while I was picking up the bell, and while I was sorting out my dry glove, Will snuck in, grabbed the bell, got a load of photos.
Yeah. I have to say the ones of Will are clearer. He pulled the bell out of the silty area, I think. Yeah. And then last weekend, the East Point, which lovely wreck, and I've dived it in better conditions than we had last weekend, but it's still a fantastic wreck. It's one of this is you're with that torch you were trying out. I don't. It looks as though it was in the mode of wide with a central beam at that point. I don't know. But it's quite bright. That the brightness of it, I don't know whether you found it was very much brighter than other things that you've been using.
Yeah, I mean, certainly seems to be that way. I mean, it's up there with kind of some of the really strong video lights that we occasionally we use. So it's an incredible thing.
Yeah. So the only thing I would say about it is that, with it being that bright, you do get sort of these high spots on it, which get a bit burnt out. So when you're doing the photography, it's probably better in the pure video mode rather than with the spot for future use.
Understood.
And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the trip to Jutland, which I've just been on. For those that don't know, the Battle of Jutland was the sort of major engagement between British and German forces in the First World War. It took place in the day and overnight on the 31st of May 1916. There were more British ships than German ships lost, and ended up at the bottom of the sea. But we had many more in reserve, whereas the Germans didn't. So ultimately, we came out on top, and the Germans, having retreated to their home port, never really came out again in the First World War. So we were on Placina, which you will recognise well, and this is in Tiburon Harbour in Denmark, which is where the expedition was based. I drove there.
It's probably worth making the point, isn't it, Rick, that Jutland, that everybody knows there's some huge battleships, huge ships out there, but it's really difficult to get to, and also very, well, you're going to tell us, I'm sure, about the weather. But it's not dive very much because it's so difficult to get to, isn't it?
It is difficult to get to. So I think the closest wreck to Tiburon is 75 miles away, and Placina travels at about 9 knots or something like that, and so you only have to do the arithmetic to realize it takes a long time to get there. You have to be sure that the weather's going to behave itself. So this is what we were faced with. The little blue dot is Tiburon, and the red bit, so sort of virtually due west of that blue dot, is where we were diving, and we were there for 2 weeks, and obviously we were all thinking we were going to go out and we we're going to dive for 14 days continuously. In actual fact, we managed a single day where we left at sort of midnight, got on site at 8 o'clock in the morning, dived, and then had a second dive, and then had to come back because the weather was closing in again. And then we went out for a 4-day spell where we were able to dive, 2 dives a day for 4 days. It was challenging. We were fighting the weather the whole time, and it was difficult. And the problem was that when we got there, the visibility wasn't very good either. So we got onto the wrecks, and this was our first dive on the HMS Defence. I've got a little bit of information about HMS Defence. So Defence was built in 1907 in Pembroke in South Wales. And she was actually a pre-dreadnought battle cruiser. So as she was launched, she was obsolete because the dreadnoughts had come in and displaced these ones. So the dreadnoughts tended to have turbine propulsion, whereas Defence had triple expansion engines. And I think she was just over about 14,500 tons, HMS Defence. As you can see, visibility wise, it was probably 6 meters, something like that. And that was probably the best visibility we got on the whole trip, unfortunately. But what you can see is a turret with the gun pointing out, ready for action. This is from the other side of it, and it to be to see these things in position was just incredible. And I was diving with Jen Smith, who is here, and she was on a mission. And if you remember, on the Negro, we found the footplate of HMS Negro. She had the same idea that there was bound to be a footplate on HMS Defence, and sure enough, we were able to find it. And this is her using her wet notes booklet to scrape the incrustation off the letters of the footplate, which just incredible to see, really. Something like that, so memorable to see it, and to find something like that was a real treat. Yeah.
And I guess people who don't know, Jen Smith is actually a serving officer in the Royal Navy. Yeah. So, I think it's fair to say she always feels a real kindred with the kind of the people who lost their lives on these kind of ships. And I think one of the things about Defence is, my understanding is, the entire crew got killed when it was sunk. And there were like 770 odd people on it. So, unbelievable, lot of life, really. It's very sobering when you dive these ships to know that so many people have lost their lives. There's an amazing museum in Tiburon, and also a big memorial park celebrating the lives lost on both sides, in actual fact. This is right at the stern of Defence, and the Admiral's walkway that sort of goes round the stern, which you can see there. There should be some letters of defence there, but we couldn't find any trace of them. But again, you can see the poor quality visibility that we were faced with. But it's a struggle to come back with pictures that in a situation like this. But I was determined to do so, and it was you have to sort of pull out all stops to get the goods. But you've not dived Jutland before, is that correct, Rick?
No, I've never dived Jutland. So it was all new to me. I think Kieran Hatton had organised the trip and he'd been there before and had got some lovely shots in good visibility, especially on HMS Defence. But we weren't going to have the same conditions, unfortunately. And it then, it got even worse. This is HMS Invincible, so a battle cruiser. You can probably see the pink line, which is the distance line from the shot line to the wreck, and the visibility there was probably less than 5 meters. You can just about make out that there's a twin turret 12-inch guns there, which were just incredible. And I've got a whole series of shots around these at end of the breaches and so on. But again, Jen was on a mission. There'd been an expedition the previous week to ours, and they'd located a space where the emergency steering gear could be seen, and we managed to find that. And what happened was that Jen went in on the other side of the wreck to provide some light from the other side, and I was able to light it from this side, and we got this pretty incredible shot of the emergency steering position in Invincible. So I think there were 6 survivors and 1,026 lost on Invincible. It's just it's and the stories of how these things went up. They were basically magazine explosions, and reading between the lines, the British attitude to explosive hygiene, if you like, was pretty poor, and they'd have the magazine doors open underneath turrets, and obviously if a shell hit, sparks would get into the magazine, and the whole things would go up, and the eyewitness reports of these ships disappearing in a matter of seconds. Just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, there's a famous quote, isn't there? I'm not entirely sure who it's by.
Yeah, from Beatty, there's something wrong with our ships. But yes, there was nothing wrong with the ships. What was wrong was the naval attitudes to looking after the vast quantities of explosive ordnance that was stored in them prior to use.
Yeah.
So this is HMS.
These days they talk about insensitive munitions,
Yeah,
which is trying to capture the idea that munitions don't explode if they get hot or anything like that. I just love the idea of you have sensitive munitions and you have insensitive munitions.
Yeah. But I think after Jutland, they changed how things worked, and they had things a bit like safes in banks, where you'd open a hatch and the ordnance had come out but close behind it, and then it would you'd go back and get the next one. So everything changed after Jutland because of these things that happened. So this was a destroyer wreck, which was a bit special, because we think we were the first team to dive it, and obviously this is at the stern of HMS Shark. Being a destroyer was a much smaller wreck, but it was really nice to do it. Thought better show some pictures of one of the German wrecks. This is the Lutzow. Some German munitions there being lit up. I was diving with Jen and also another diver called Claire Pratt, who both used GoPros in that same configuration. So it was really nice to have people to light things up for me, and that's why it was particularly good for me to dive with them. So that this is both Jen and Claire lighting up some projectiles from the Lutzow. I think the Lutzow probably had marginally better viz than even the Defence, in actual fact. So it was a super.
Still not great though, is it? It's and I guess a real pity for you guys to go out there.
Yeah. But
all the time in the Defence, and then not to be rewarded with decent viz is really it's disappointing, I guess.
It's the way it goes, isn't it? It's one of the you'd think in mid-June all the plankton had be finished and gone, but it wasn't. The frustrating thing was we jumped in and the first 20 to 25 meters were like gin, and then it just closed in. It was sort of thermocline and it was all murky below that. It's one of those things.
And this is all 50-meter stuff, isn't it? I guess
it's all 50 meters or thereabouts. So this one's the Indefatigable, which rather embarrassingly, myself, Jen, Claire, and a Danish diver lost the shot, and we had to bag off and got a good ribbing afterwards. It was one of those situations where the dive plan was that you go down a shot line, come back to the shot line to go back up the shot to the deco station, but on this particular dive we got disorientated and lost, and four of us had to bag up separately. But,
I mean, I noticed you did use a distance line on. I think you used a distance line on Rex.
Yeah, most of them you could. There were enough navigational aids to sort of help. I think the Indefatigable is a bit of a scrapyard, and that's probably why we got a bit lost. We shouldn't have got lost, to be quite honest. It was just one of those things that we did. And I think on Invincible, the problem was the shot line was a little bit on the sand away from the wreck. So when we got down there, we actually couldn't see the wreck at all, and had to do a little bit of a search to find it. Once we'd found it, we then realized didn't really need a distance line if we just left the strobes on the shot line, but because it was then easy to find your way around. And
many of these wrecks have been salvaged as well, haven't they? I think
so. Yeah, they have. So I'm not sure to sort of what extent they've been salvaged, but I know some of them have had sort of non-ferrous stuff taken off them and so on. But once we'd found that defence footplate, there was obviously some concern as to whether someone had come along and take that as a souvenir. There's obviously such a good museum in Tiburon. It would, if it is going to be lifted, it should go there really, but we'll have to see what happens. For now, as you know, with Bob has a no artifact recovery policy on his boat, so we weren't going to lift it. Then I thought I'd put this one in. This was on the Queen Mary, which is another one that exploded and was lost in about 4 seconds with massive loss of life. Spotted this, one of the things about taking photographs on these, the vis doesn't look too bad there, but it was probably just as bad as anywhere else. But you sort of take pictures of details as well, and this is one of those. And the next shot sort of shows it a bit close, and there's obviously some sort of scale or dial on that. Nobody had any idea what it was. That's the whole thing again. So if any of your viewers know what it is, it would be good to know. But obviously it's something of importance from back in 1916, but we don't know what it is. Yeah. And then we did do another German wreck, the Frauenlob, and this is actually Bob Anderson, who was diving on this trip. He was not driving the boat, and this is the fire control top on the Frauenlob, which was an interesting thing to come across. And as you can see, the visibility is just pretty shocking. But
reminds me of Scapper, actually.
I'm
pretty certain I've dived spotting tops in Scapper in viz like that.
Yeah, very similar. And there's a real link between Scapper and the Jutland wrecks, because a lot of them, like Mark Graf and Cranpridge Willem, were obviously in the line on the German side, and they fought at Jutland. But when you see them in Scapa, all the munitions have been removed. Whereas here, the munitions are still in place. I think that might.
These were ships in fighting order, weren't they? This was a proper battle,
absolutely.
And yeah.
So I think this is my last slide, which is back to defence and Jen lighting up the lettering on that footplate, which it was a great thing to see. Shame we didn't have better viz, but there you go. One of those things. You have to accept what you're given and try and work with the conditions you've got. And I suppose that's the thing. When we jumped in at the weekend, we weren't to know whether it was going to be, because I think you dived on Friday and had really gin clear viz, and we were then diving actually fairly close to that position, but we had much less viz, I think, than you'd had the previous day, and a relatively small distance away. But that it's just the way it is, and you have to work with the conditions you've got. And there we go. That's my trip to Jutland.
Fantastic. Well, thanks a lot for sharing that with us and talking about it, because it's somewhere I would love to dive, Jutland. It's kind of bucket list stuff. I think it's one of those locations that often, because it is so difficult to get to, people kind of forget about it or don't think about it. But it would be, I'm really jealous of the fact that you got to go there. Hopefully I'll dive it. Hopefully I'll get better viz than you.
I would seriously consider going again, to be quite honest. I think it's relatively easy diving. It's 50-meter diving. So you get best part of an hour on the wrecks for about an hour's deco. Which is a really good return compared to the 100-meter stuff anyway. And it would be great to go back in good visibility if I could guarantee that.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks a lot for sharing those photos with us, Rick.
I didn't talk much about photographic settings, but that's the boring side. It's all fairly. You get away with what you can. High ISO is your friend on wreck diving, and I have to say there are for the people who might be a bit sort of more interested in the photography. I use denoise in Lightroom quite a bit, because if I'm shooting at 20,000 ISO, which almost certainly a lot of the shots you've just looked at will have been shot at 20,000 ISO on the Z9. They are noisy when they come out of the camera. You have to use denoise. And the other thing, which is something that materialized late last year, is an add-on to Photoshop called Backscatter Exterminator, which has been developed by Erin Quigley in the States, and just gets rid of horrendous backscatter really well. I've not got any before and after shots, but I could show you some which are absolutely amazing. It works magic, actually. So if you're doing rec photography, because sometimes you have to add a bit of light and you get backscatter kicking up, and if you can remove it, it makes all the difference. So yeah, that's I'm sure there'll be people who'll be interested in that. What I'll do is I'll get the details off you, Rick, and I'll put the details of that in the comment in the description for the video, so people can know where to get it. I'll tell you what, I mean, that's awesome, Rick. To have a kind of journey through your diving career and a journey through your photographs has been absolutely amazing there. I guess I didn't warn you about this, so I'm gonna put you on the spot. I'm gonna say, of all the photographs that you've taken, which is your favorite, do you reckon? I've probably got two, actually. One is that shot of the anchor on Britannic, and the other one is the Jacob Jones bow.
Good. Yeah, and to be honest, they're both bangers, and I think they've both got, you know,
they
I guess
both have their own things,
significance.
really. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the Jacob Jones bell shot is a real close in detail shot, whereas the Britannic shot is a wide, you know, taking the scene shot. They both have their merits.
Yeah. And I guess have special significance for you. I mean, particularly the Jacob Jones bell, because you obviously found it, didn't you? And and you know, for those who don't know, that bell was lifted by the Royal Navy and is somewhere being preserved. I think before, you know, at some point we very much hope it will go on display in a museum somewhere.
Yeah.
But okay, brilliant.
Good. Yeah.
Well, that's been awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay. No worries.
Rick. And I hope everybody listening, I hope you've enjoyed this. As always, you know, if you could like and comment and subscribe and all those kind of things. And, you know, if you've got any questions or you want to say something, you know, stick them in the comments. And, you know, I'm sure Rick will be reading them.
I'll keep an eye on the comments, and if anyone has any photographic questions that I can answer in the comments, I'll do so.
So that's awesome. Okay, well, thank you very much, Rick. Thank you everyone for listening. And goodbye.
Cheers then.